Begging a nigga to be with me after he got a baby on the way. I would never be having matching t-shirts on with a nigga that got a baby on the way. I would never be trying to play family with a nigga that got a baby on the way.
Oh, who's standing over there? She
got a baby in the car. How you feel? She didn't drop that shit off. You scared as hell, all right?
You had it with the car.
You were telling yourself on the car.
I would never want to be with a nigga that burnt me while I was pregnant. I would never want to be a bitch like that. I would never be telling random people that my baby daddy burnt me. I would never tell nobody no shit like that. I would never tell random people that my baby daddy cheated on me our whole relationship, my whole pregnancy, that he cheated on me. I would never, you could never get me to tell no shit like that to no random people that I don't fucking know. I would never want to have a job to where I'm wiping old people's ass and giving old people showers and feeding them and shit.
There's a moment in every case where you realize the story isn't over. It's just entering a new chapter, one nobody saw coming. For the family of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon, that moment came on December 23rd, 2025, outside a Chicago courthouse, when the fragile line between grief and rage finally shattered. What happened that day wasn't just another court hearing. It was a collision of pain, accusations, and unresolved fury that left 3 people in handcuffs and a community asking the same question: how did we get here? If you're just finding this case now, let me bring you into a story that's been unfolding in Chicago for months. A story about 2 women who never met, a man who connected them both, and a tragedy that's torn through multiple families like a blade. This isn't just about what happened on September 8th, 2025. It's about everything that came before, everything that came after, and the question that haunts every conversation about this case. Could any of this have been prevented? Before we go further, if stories like this matter to you, stories that don't just report the facts, but try to understand the human weight behind them, subscribe to this channel. We cover cases that deserve attention, cases where the story doesn't end with an arrest, and cases that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about violence, justice, and the systems we trust to protect us. Let me take you back to where this all began, because understanding what happened outside that courthouse requires understanding the months of tension that led to it. Romeca Meeks-Blackmon, known to her family and friends as Romeca, was a mother, a daughter, a sister. By all accounts, she was protective, especially of the women in her life, especially of her grandmother. She'd raised her 7-year-old son, Carlos Jr., to be a gentleman, the kind of kid who opened doors and made the honor roll. That detail matters. It tells you something about who she was as a mother, about the values she tried to instill, about the future she was building. September 8th, 2025, was the day that future ended. Romeca was shot and killed in Chicago, and within hours, the story began to spread across social media like wildfire. But this wasn't a random act of violence, and it wasn't a case where investigators had to search for answers. The complications were immediate, personal, and deeply tangled in the kind of relationships that make people say, this was bound to happen. At the center of it all was a man named Carlos Smith. And here's where the story gets complicated in a way that's hard to untangle even now. Carlos had children with 2 different women, Romeca Meeks-Blackmon and Holly Johnson. That fact alone doesn't mean anything inherently tragic. Blended families exist. Co-parenting exists. But in this case, the connection between these 2 women wasn't built on cooperation or mutual respect. It was built on tension, on social media exchanges, on accusations and counter-accusations that have been building for months, maybe longer. Holly Johnson was a concealed carry permit holder. That's a detail that came up repeatedly in the court proceedings, and it matters because it speaks to someone who understood firearms, who'd gone through the process of legally obtaining the right to carry a weapon for protection. She had no significant criminal record, just a minor misdemeanor that, in the words of one legal analyst, wasn't even worth discussing. On paper, Holly Johnson wasn't someone you'd predict would be involved in a homicide case. But paper doesn't tell you about anger, about fear, about the kind of confrontations that spiral out of control faster than anyone can stop them. According to the proffer, the document prepared by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office outlining the facts of the case, there were witnesses. There were accounts of what happened that day, accounts that painted a picture prosecutors felt was clear enough to charge Holly Johnson with murder. The details from that proffer spread quickly, and they were explosive. Witnesses reportedly saw interactions between Holly and Carlos, including what was described as a fist bump after shooting. That detail, true or not, became a flashpoint. It suggested premeditation, coordination, a level of callousness that made people online furious. Carlos Smith himself went live on social media shortly after the charges were announced, and what he said complicated the narrative even further. He denied the fist bump ever happened. He called it a lie, something invented or misinterpreted. He talked about his relationship with Romeca, and he didn't shy away from the difficult parts. He admitted she used to go crazy, that there were times she'd come to his job, times she confronted him physically, times he'd try to leave and couldn't. He described her as someone who could be aggressive, someone who put him in situations he didn't know how to handle. And then he said something that stayed with a lot of people. "I love her though, man. Miss her." That contradiction, the admission of conflict, the expression of love, it's the kind of thing that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't fit into neat categories. It doesn't let you say, this person was purely a victim or this person was purely at fault. It forces you to sit with the reality that relationships can be violent and loving at the same time, that people can miss someone who hurt them, that trauma doesn't always look the way we expect it to. But here's what wasn't in dispute. Romeca was dead. A 7-year-old boy no longer had his mother, and Holly Johnson was sitting in a jail cell, pregnant, facing murder charges. 21 days after Holly's arrest, she appeared in court for the second time. Her attorney made another attempt to get her released on bond, and the arguments were predictable but not unreasonable. Holly had no significant criminal history. She was pregnant. She wasn't a flight risk. These are the kind of arguments defense attorneys make because they're supposed to make them, because even people charged with serious crimes have rights, because the presumption of innocence is supposed to mean something. The judge denied the request. Holly would remain in custody. The next hearing was set for January 7th, 2026. And that's when things went sideways. Here's what we know about what happened at that December 23rd hearing, pieced together from multiple sources, witness accounts, and video footage that spread across social media within hours. The courtroom itself was packed. This wasn't unusual. Both families had shown up in force at the previous hearing, requiring court officials to move proceedings to a larger space just to accommodate everyone. Security knew this case was emotionally charged. They knew there was potential for conflict. But what happened next suggests that either the precautions weren't enough, or the emotions were too raw to contain. Holly Johnson's family was released from the courtroom first. According to witnesses, they lingered in the hallway. They didn't leave the building immediately. They waited. Whether that was intentional provocation or just people taking their time, we don't know. What we do know is that when Romeca's family was released shortly after, both groups ended up in the same space. And that's when the word started. The video from inside the courthouse hallway shows exactly what you'd expect when two sides of tragedy come face to face. Raised voices, accusations, people being held back by others trying to keep the peace. You can hear both sides. There's no clear indication of who said what first, who initiated the confrontation. It's chaos. The kind of chaos where everyone feels justified in their anger, and no one's really listening to anyone else. But inside the courthouse, there are rules. There are sheriff's deputies. There are consequences. So the confrontation stayed verbal until it moved outside. What happened next is where the accounts diverge. And this is important because the truth of what sparked the physical fight determines how we understand everything that followed. Some witnesses say Carlos Smith approached Romeca's family outside the courthouse, that he said something or did something that escalated the situation. Other witnesses say the opposite, that members of Romeca's family confronted Carlos, that they were the ones who initiated the physical confrontation. The video that circulated online starts after the fight has already begun, so it doesn't answer the question of who threw the first punch or who made the first move. What the video does show is this: Carlos Smith being led away in handcuffs, a person wearing pink, the color Romeca supporters have been wearing as a sign of solidarity, also being led away in handcuffs, and a third individual whose affiliation is immediately clear, also detained. 3 people, 3 different perspectives on what happened, and no definitive answer about who was at fault. Carlos posted on social media later that day. He said it was 25 against 3, that he was outnumbered but fine, that people wearing Target jackets came at him, a reference that suggested he was implying Romeca's family and supporters were united in their approach. He said he wasn't worried, that it was just a rumble, that if anyone had video proof he'd lost the fight, they should post it. The subtext was clear. Carlos didn't think he'd been beaten, and he wanted to control the narrative. But Romeca's family had their own narrative, and it was captured in the video that went viral. You can hear her sister's voice, raw with pain and rage. "You ruined that girl's life. You killed my sister." The "you" in that statement was directed at Carlos, and the accusation was unambiguous. In her mind, Carlos bore responsibility for what happened to Romeca, whether he pulled the trigger or not. That's the weight of grief talking. That's the voice of someone who's lost a sibling and is looking for someone to blame, someone to hold accountable, someone to make feel even a fraction of the pain she's feeling. And Carlos, by virtue of being a connection between Romeca and Holly, had become that person in her eyes. The internet, predictably, had opinions, lots of them. People who've been following the case from the beginning saw the courthouse fight as proof that Carlos should have been arrested months ago, that his role in the events of September 8th was more significant than what had been publicly acknowledged. Others saw it as a family lashing out in grief, understandably but unfairly targeting someone who was also a victim of the situation in his own way. And still others saw it as evidence that the entire case was more complicated than anyone wanted to admit, that there were no clear heroes or villains, just people making terrible decisions in emotionally impossible situations. The journalist covering the case, a local reporter who'd been following it since the beginning, addressed some of the criticism she'd been receiving in a Facebook Live shortly after the courthouse incident. People had accused her of being biased, of knowing Romeca's family personally, of pushing a narrative that favored one side over the other. She set the record straight. She didn't know any of these people before the case. Romeca's family had reached out to her because they wanted their story told. Carlos had reached out to her through his sister, also wanting his perspective heard. Holly Johnson's family had contacted her as well, offering to share their side, though Holly herself had been advised by her attorney not to speak publicly. "I don't know anybody here," the reporter said. "The only people I feel any type of absolute pouring of my heart out for is obviously anybody in this situation who's lost. That's all sides, and especially the children in this. The children. Let's talk about them, because in all the noise, the social media fights, the courthouse brawls, the accusations and counter-accusations, the children are the ones who've lost the most and had the least control over any of it. Carlos Jr., Romeca's 7-year-old son, is being raised by his grandmother now. His mother is gone. His father is entangled in a case that's made him a public figure for all the wrong reasons. Carlos Jr. had a Christmas, thanks to community donations and the efforts of people who wanted to give him some semblance of normalcy during the holidays. But no amount of gifts or goodwill changes the fact that his mother isn't coming back. Holly Johnson is pregnant. That baby will be born into a situation no child should have to navigate. A mother in jail, a father under intense public scrutiny, a family divided by accusations of murder. Even if Holly is eventually acquitted, even if she's released and allowed to raise that child, the shadow of this case will follow them both for the rest of their lives. And then there's the baby Carlos had with Holly, a child who's not even a year old yet, caught between two families who can barely be in the same room without violence erupting. That baby's future is uncertain in ways that should break your heart if you let yourself think about it too long. The reporter was right to focus on the children. They're the ones paying the price for adult decisions, adult anger, adult failures to de-escalate or walk away or prioritize what actually matters. So what happens next? The legal process, for one thing. Holly Johnson's next court date is January 7th. And if the courthouse fight is any indication, security is going to have to be significantly tighter. The judge has a decision to make. Does she allow both families to continue attending hearings, knowing the risk of violence? Or does she limit courtroom access, requiring people to watch remotely via Zoom, sacrificing the family's right to be present in the name of safety? There's precedent for this. In cases where emotions run so high that courtroom decorum can't be maintained, judges have the authority to restrict who can attend in person. It's not a decision anyone wants to make, because it feels like punishing grieving families for their grief. But it's also the judge's responsibility to ensure that the legal proceedings can happen without turning into a circus. The question of whether Carlos will face charges remains open. Despite the widespread belief online that he should be arrested, despite the video evidence of the courthouse fight, despite the accusations from Romeca's family, no charges have been filed against him in connection with her death. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office has the proffer. They have witness statements. If they believed there was enough evidence to charge Carlos, they would have done it by now. The fact that they haven't suggests that legally, whatever his role was that day, it doesn't meet the threshold for criminal liability. But legal liability and moral responsibility aren't the same thing, and that's where the court of public opinion diverges sharply from the court of law. People online have convicted Carlos based on the proffered details, based on his own admissions about his relationship with Romeca, based on the simple fact that he's a common thread between two women, and one of them is dead. Whether that's fair or not depends on what you think justice looks like, and how much weight you put on someone's presence in a situation versus their direct actions. The journalist covering the case made an important point during her Facebook Live, and it's worth repeating here. The details people were so angry about, the fist bump, the witness accounts, all of it, came from the Cook County State Attorney's Office, not from her reporting. She was reading from official documents, from the proffer that prosecutors prepared as part of their case against Holly Johnson. When Carlos went online and denied those details when he said they were lies, he was disputing the official record, not the journalist's interpretation of it. That distinction matters because it gets at something larger. In high-profile cases, especially ones that play out on social media, the line between fact and narrative gets blurry fast. People choose what to believe based on who they trust, who they sympathize with, who they think is telling the truth. And in a case like this, where there are multiple traumatized people all giving different accounts of what happened, the truth isn't always clear or accessible or even singular. Let's talk about Holly Johnson for a moment, because in all of this, she's been reduced to a defendant, a name in a court filing, a person other people have opinions about. But she's also a human being. And if we're going to understand this case, we have to at least try to understand her perspective. Holly had no significant criminal history. She was a legal gun owner. According to people who knew her, she wasn't violent, wasn't the type of person you'd expect to be involved in something like this. But something happened on September 8th that changed everything. Maybe she felt threatened. Maybe she felt she had no choice. Maybe it was self-defense, the way her attorneys will argue. Or maybe it was something else, something that doesn't fit neatly into legal categories, something that happens when fear and anger and desperation collide in a single moment. We don't know what Holly Johnson is thinking right now, sitting in a jail cell pregnant, facing a murder charge. We don't know if she regrets what happened, if she believes she was justified, if she's terrified of what comes next. Her attorney has advised her not to speak publicly, which is smart legal strategy, but leaves a vacuum that other people's narratives rush to fill. One of Holly's alleged family members spoke out on social media after the courthouse fight, posting a message that essentially said, "We're going to show up at the next hearing, and we're going to see who's really about this." It was a challenge, a declaration that they weren't backing down, that they defend Holly's name in public just as fiercely as Romeca's family was defending hers. It was also, depending on your perspective, either loyalty or recklessness, a promise to escalate tensions at a time when de-escalation was desperately needed. There's another layer to this story that hasn't gotten as much attention, but deserves it. The role of social media in amplifying and distorting what's happening. Every update in this case has been dissected online. Every court appearance has been live-streamed or recorded or discussed in real time by thousands of people who have no personal connection to anyone involved. The courthouse fight was captured on video and shared widely within hours, with people taking sides, making judgments, adding commentary that ranged from thoughtful analysis to outright harassment. Carlos complained about this in one of his posts. All y'all do is screenshot, screen record, and play detective. Sit y'all down. He wasn't wrong. The internet has turned this case into a spectator sport, with people treating it like entertainment rather than a tragedy that's destroyed multiple lives. And while public interest in criminal cases isn't new, the speed and scale of social media means that everyone involved, Romeca's family, Holly's family, Carlos, the witnesses, even the journalists covering the story, are subject to constant scrutiny and judgment from people who have access to fragment of information and no obligation to be fair or accurate. One person who spoke out about this was someone who'd known Holly years ago, someone who'd been on a drill team with her. This person went on social media and posted about their experience with Holly, describing her as a slow learner when it came to dance moves, someone without much rhythm. It was a minor observation, the kind of thing that in any other context would be meaningless. But because it was posted in the context of this case, it became ammunition. One of Holly's family members saw the post and responded by bringing up something from this person's past, an incident from high school involving a knife, an incident this person had clearly moved on from but still carried shame about. The family member screenshot old posts, used them to humiliate this person publicly, turned their attempt to share a memory into a weapon, and then a community advocate, someone who works in the neighborhood, someone who knows the mayor, left a comment with a rainbow emoji, a clear implication about this person's sexuality, meant as an insult. This person, who identifies as heterosexual but supports LGBTQ communities, was devastated. They made a video talking about it, explaining how they'd been bullied for years, how they brought a knife to school once out of fear, how they'd been lucky to get caught before they hurt someone or got themselves killed. Bullying leads to mass shooting, suicide, they said. Luckily, I got heart and some sense to really think about it. I was glad I was caught with that knife. I was glad because it hits me today, damn, somebody could have lost their baby and I could have been charged with murder. That story, that tangent, might seem unrelated to the main case, but it's not. It's an example of how this case has metastasized into something bigger, how the anger and pain surrounding Romeca's death has created a permission structure for people to hurt each other in ways that have nothing to do with justice or accountability. It's become tribal. It's become about sides. And in that environment, everyone loses. The journalist who's been covering this case said something during her Facebook Live that stuck with me. Family wants justice. But the judge is a very big job here. The judge's number one job is safety. She was talking about courtroom security, about the need to prevent more violence, but the statement applies more broadly. Justice isn't just about punishment or accountability. It's about creating conditions where healing can begin, where children can grow up without inheriting their parents' traumas, where communities can find a way forward that doesn't involve more funerals. Right now, that feels impossible. Right now, the case is still too raw, the wounds too fresh, the anger too consuming. But at some point, the legal process will reach a conclusion. There will be a trial. There will be a verdict. Holly Johnson will either be convicted or acquitted. Carlos will either face charges or he won't. Romeca's family will either find some measure of peace in the outcome, or they'll feel like the system failed them. And the children, Carlos Jr., the baby Holly and Carlos share, the child Holly is carrying, will grow up with this story as part of their history, part of their identity, whether they want it or not. I keep coming back to something the reporter said. The only people I feel any type of absolute pouring of my heart out for is the children. Because that's the truth, isn't it? The adults in this situation made choices. They participated in conflicts that escalated. They said things and did things that contributed to the tragedy. But the children didn't choose any of this. They're innocent in the most literal sense, and they're the ones who will carry the consequences for the rest of their lives. Carlos Jr. will grow up knowing his mother was killed. He'll grow up with questions about his father's role in what happened, about whether his dad could have prevented it, about whether the man raising him now is the same man who loved his mother or the man who failed to protect her. Those aren't questions a 7-year-old should have to grapple with, but they're the questions he'll have to answer for himself eventually. The baby Holly and Carlos share will grow up knowing their mother was in jail when they were born, that their father is a controversial figure, that their very existence is tangled up in a story people can't stop talking about. They'll probably Google their own name one day and find articles, videos, social media posts, strangers' opinions about their family. That's not a childhood anyone would choose. And the child Holly is carrying right now, that baby will be born into a world where their mother is either in prison or recently released, where their first months of life will be shaped by legal battles and public scrutiny, and a level of stress no pregnancy should have to endure. The research is clear. Maternal stress affects fetal development, affects long-term health outcomes, affects the attachment bond between mother and child. That baby is already paying a price for events they had no part in. So when I think about this case, when I try to make sense of what happened at that courthouse on December 23rd, I keep coming back to one question. What would accountability actually look like here? And I don't mean legal accountability, though that matters too. I mean moral accountability, communal accountability, the kind that acknowledges everyone who contributed to this tragedy and asks what they owe, not just to the legal system, but to each other, to the children, to the possibility of a future that isn't defined by this moment. For Carlos, maybe accountability looks like being honest about his role in the tensions between Romeca and Holly, about whether there were things he could have said or done differently, about whether he prioritized his own convenience over the safety and well-being of the women in his life. That doesn't mean he's legally culpable for Romeca's death. It means he's part of the ecosystem that created the conditions for it. For Holly's family, maybe accountability looks like recognizing that defending their loved one doesn't require attacking everyone who questions her actions, that loyalty can coexist with honesty, that protecting Holly's dignity doesn't mean denying the reality of what Romeca's family has lost. For Romeca's family, maybe accountability looks like finding ways to honor her memory that don't involve violence, that don't perpetuate the cycle of harm that led to her death in the first place. That's an impossible ask when you're in the middle of grief, when the person you love is gone and the person accused of killing her is still alive, still pregnant, still able to advocate for her own release. But impossible doesn't mean not worth striving for. And for the rest of us, the people watching this unfold online, making comments, sharing videos, having opinions about people we've never met, maybe accountability looks like remembering that these are real people, that our words have weight, that the way we engage with stories like this shapes the culture that makes them possible or prevents them. The Cook County Sheriff's Department is still investigating what happened at the courthouse. They have body camera footage from the deputies who were present. They have witness statements from both sides. At some point, they'll release a report that explains, from their perspective, what transpired, who initiated the fight, whether anyone will be charged with assault or disorderly conduct. That report will either vindicate one side's account or muddy the waters further. Either way, it won't change the fundamental reality. Grief and anger collided. People got hurt. And the legal system now has to figure out how to manage a case where the courtroom itself has become a site of conflict. The judge presiding over Holly Johnson's case has a decision to make before the January 7 hearing. Does she implement stricter security measures? Does she limit who can attend in person? Does she issue warnings to both families about the consequences of further violence? These are all options judges have used in other high-profile cases, and they're all imperfect solutions. Limiting courtroom access feels like punishing families for their grief, but allowing the current situation to continue risks more violence, risks turning every hearing into a potential flashpoint. There's no good answer here. There's only the least bad option, the one that balances the family's right to be present with the court's obligation to maintain order and safety. And whatever the judge decides, someone will feel like they've been treated unfairly, like their pain matters less than someone else's, like the system is failing them. Because here's the hard truth about cases like this. The legal system isn't designed to heal wounds. It's designed to determine guilt or innocence, to assign punishment or release, to follow procedures that feel maddeningly slow and inadequate when you're the one waiting for justice. For Romeca's family, no verdict will bring her back. For Holly's family, no acquittal will erase the months she spent in jail or the fact that her child will be born under these circumstances. The legal process will reach a conclusion, but the human cost will continue long after the courthouse doors close. I want to circle back to something that got lost in all the chaos of the courthouse fight. Holly Johnson's second bond hearing. Her attorney made another attempt to get her released, and the arguments were the same as before. Holly had no significant criminal history. She was pregnant. She wasn't a flight risk. From a defense attorney's perspective, these are valid points. The presumption of innocence is supposed to mean something. People awaiting trial aren't supposed to be punished before they've been convicted. But the judge denied the request again. And while we don't have the judge's written reasoning, we can infer the factors at play. This is a murder case. The victim is dead, and her family is present in the courtroom, visibly grieving, demanding justice. Releasing Holly on bond, even with restrictions, would be seen as a betrayal by Romeca's family, as evidence that the system values the defendant's comfort over the victim's memory. Politically, personally, pragmatically, it's a decision most judges would avoid. So Holly remains in custody. She'll spend the rest of her pregnancy in jail. She'll give birth, and depending on the facility's policies, she may have hours or days with her baby before they're separated. That baby will be placed with family, most likely Carlos, unless the court determines he's unfit, and Holly will return to her cell to await trial. It's a grim reality, and it raises questions about how we treat pregnant defendants, about whether our criminal justice system is equipped to handle cases where the defendant's pregnancy creates competing moral imperatives. On one side, there's the argument that pregnancy shouldn't grant special privileges, that all defendants should be treated equally under the law. On the other side, there's a recognition that an innocent child is being affected by decisions about their mother's custody, that the conditions of pretrial detention aren't designed for pregnant women, that the stress of incarceration poses real risks to both mother and baby. These aren't easy questions, and reasonable people can disagree about where the balance should lie. What's not debatable is that a child is going to be born into the situation, and that child deserves better than what they're getting. Let's talk about Carlos Smith's social media presence, because it's been a significant part of how this story has unfolded and how public opinion has formed. Carlos has been active online since Romeca's death, posting updates, responding to criticism, sharing his perspective on what happened. Some of what he's posted has been helpful, clarifying facts, pushing back on mischaracterizations, humanizing himself in a narrative where he's often been painted as a villain. But some of what he's posted has been inflammatory, defensive in ways that make people more suspicious rather than less. After the courthouse fight, Carlos posted a photo of himself looking uninjured, with a caption essentially saying, "I'm fine, I'm not worried." It was a message to people online who were celebrating his apparent defeat, a way of saying, "You didn't win, I'm still here." But it also read as defiant, as someone unwilling to acknowledge the gravity of the situation or the pain his presence causes Romeca's family. Carlos also posted, "People lie to make their wrong right," which seemed to be directed at the accusations that he'd started the courthouse fight. He wanted the narrative to be that he was jumped, that he was outnumbered, that he was the victim of the confrontation. And maybe that's true. Maybe he was approached by members of Romeca's family who wanted revenge or confrontation, or just to make him feel a fraction of the pain they're feeling. But even if that's what happened, the optics are terrible. Carlos is alive. Romeca is not. His presence at that courthouse, regardless of his legal right to be there, is a wound for her family, a reminder of everything they've lost. Carlos's cousin, or alleged cousin, the relationship isn't entirely clear, has also been active on social media, posting messages of support for Holly, making statement about showing up at the January hearing, essentially promising that Holly's side won't back down. It's loyalty, and loyalty isn't a bad thing in itself. But in this context, it reads as provocation, as a promise that the next court date will bring more conflict, more tension, more potential for violence. The question I keep asking myself is, what does Carlos owe Romeca's family? Not legally. We've established that unless new evidence emerges, he's not facing criminal charges. But ethically, morally, as a human being who was connected to both women, as a father of children with both of them, what does he owe? Maybe the answer is space. Maybe the answer is recognizing that his presence at these hearings, while legally permitted, is salt in a wound that's still raw. Maybe the answer is finding ways to support Holly that don't involve showing up in spaces where Romeca's family is trying to grieve and find justice. Maybe the answer is thinking about his son, Carlos Jr., and asking himself what example he's setting. What lessons a boy is learning from watching his father navigate the situation. Or maybe that's asking too much. Maybe when you're in the middle of a situation like this, when you're being accused online, when people are calling for your arrest, when you're grieving too, because Carlos did lose someone he had a relationship with, complicated as it was, maybe the idea of gracefully stepping back isn't realistic. Maybe survival mode doesn't allow for that kind of reflection. I don't know. And that's part of what makes this case so difficult to process. There are no clear villains here, except maybe the circumstances, the escalation, the failure of everyone involved to de-escalate before it was too late. Everyone in this story is human, which means everyone has made mistakes. Everyone has acted out of emotion. Everyone has said or done things they might regret if they had the luxury of hindsight. The journalist covering this case has been under fire too, and it's worth examining why. Some people accuse her of being biased toward Romeca's family, of knowing them personally, of pushing a narrative that made Holly look guilty before trial. The journalist addressed this directly. She doesn't know any of these people. She met Romeca's family through her work. She connected with Carlos through his sister. She spoke with Holly's family members who reached out to her. She's been trying to cover the case fairly, which in a situation that's emotionally charged means everyone thinks she's biased against them. That's the impossible position journalists find themselves in with cases like this. Report the facts as presented by the state's attorney, and you're accused of bias. Include the defendant's perspective, and you're accused of giving a platform to a murderer. Focus on the human cost, and you're accused of being too emotional. Focus on the legal process, and you're accused of being cold and detached. There's no winning, only the attempt to do the work with integrity and let the criticism roll off. The journalist made a point that deserves emphasis. The details people were angriest about, the fist bump, the witness statements, came from the official proffer, not from her reporting. She was reading from court documents, from the case the prosecution is building. When people accuse her of lying, what they were really saying is that they don't believe the state's attorney's version of events. That's their right. But shooting the messenger doesn't change what's in the official record. One of the most interesting dynamics in this case is how social media has created parallel narratives that exist independently of the legal proceedings. Online, people have already convicted Holly or defended her, already decided Carlos is guilty of something or innocent of everything, already formed opinions that no amount of evidence will change. The trial, when it happens, will be a formality for many of these people. They've already decided what the truth is. That's dangerous. Not because public opinion doesn't matter, but because it creates pressure on the legal system to deliver a verdict that satisfies the crowd rather than one that follows the evidence. Jurors aren't supposed to be influenced by social media, but they're human. They live in the same world the rest of us do. They probably heard about this case. They probably have opinions. The question is whether they can set those opinions aside and evaluate the evidence fairly. That's asking a lot. Maybe too much. There's a broader conversation happening in the background of this case, one that's worth pulling into focus. The conversation about domestic violence, about co-parenting conflicts, about what happens when relationships between people with children turn toxic. Carlos described his relationship with Romeca as volatile. He talked about her showing up at his job, about physical confrontations, about feeling like he couldn't escape. If the genders were reversed, we'd immediately recognize that as a description of domestic violence. But because Carlos is a man, because we have cultural scripts about men being the aggressors and women being the victims, his account gets complicated, questioned, sometimes dismissed. I'm not saying Carlos was purely a victim in his relationship with Romeca. I'm saying relationships can be mutually violent, can be toxic in ways that harm everyone involved, can create situations where both people feel trapped and afraid and reactive. That doesn't excuse what happened. It doesn't make Romeca's death any less tragic. But it does suggest that the dynamics between these people were more complex than innocent victim and guilty perpetrator. Holly's relationship with Carlos is its own question mark. We don't know much about it. We don't know if it was healthy or toxic. If Carlos treated her the same way he described being treated by Romeca, if there was violence or just conflict or something in between. What we know is that Holly and Romeca were connected through him, that whatever tensions existed between them were rooted in that shared connection, that the confrontation on September 8th was a culmination of months or maybe years of something building. Could Carlos have prevented what happened? That's the question people keep asking, and it's the question that haunts every case like this. Could the person in the middle, the person both parties have a relationship with, have done something different that would have changed the outcome? Maybe. Maybe if Carlos had been more proactive about managing the conflict between Romeca and Holly, about setting boundaries, about refusing to participate in drama or allow the women in his life to be put in positions where they felt threatened by each other. Maybe if he'd recognized the danger earlier and taken steps to protect both of them. Or maybe not. Maybe the tensions between Romeca and Holly would have escalated regardless of what Carlos did or didn't do. Maybe once two people are on a collision course, once emotions have reached a certain intensity, the outcome is inevitable and the only variable is timing. I don't have an answer to that question, but I do think it's worth asking, because if we're going to prevent future tragedies like this one, we need to understand not just a moment of violence, but the months and years of smaller decisions that led to it. The courthouse fight has raised questions about court security that go beyond the specific case. How do you balance the public's right to attend trials, to witness justice being done, with the need to prevent violence in and around the courthouse? How do you protect families who are grieving and angry and desperate for accountability, without turning the courthouse into a fortress? In some jurisdictions, high-profile cases are handled with extraordinary security measures, metal detectors, bag searches, separate entrances for different parties, restrictions on who can attend. In other jurisdictions, the approach is more relaxed, based on the assumption that most people, even in emotionally charged situations, will respect the dignity of the court. The courthouse fight suggests that assumption may not hold in this case. The next hearing is in January, and security will almost certainly be tighter. There may be a larger law enforcement presence. There may be explicit warnings to both families about the consequences of further violence. There may even be a decision to limit courtroom access, to require people to watch via video stream rather than attend in person. None of those measures will address the underlying emotion, the grief and rage that's driving the conflict. But they might prevent another fight, another video going viral, another moment that distracts from the legal proceedings and turns this case into even more of a spectacle than it already is. Let's talk about what justice might look like in this case, because I think that's the question everyone's grappling with, whether they're articulating it or not. For Romeca's family, justice probably looks like a conviction, a long sentence, accountability for the person they believe took their loved one from them. It probably looks like Holly Johnson never getting a hold of the baby she's carrying, like Carlos facing some kind of consequence for his role in what happened, like the legal system validating their belief that Romeca's life mattered and her death demands the harshest possible punishment. For Holly's family, justice probably looks like an acquittal, a recognition that Holly acted in self-defense or that the prosecution can't prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. It probably looks like Holly being released, being able to raise her children, being able to rebuild her life without the weight of a murder conviction. Those two visions of justice are incompatible. One family will walk away from this feeling like the system failed them. Maybe both families will. That's the tragedy of the adversarial legal system. It forces us to think in terms of winners and losers, guilty or innocent, punishment or release. It doesn't have space for the reality that multiple things can be true at once, that Holly can have acted out of fear and Romeca can have been unjustly killed, that Carlos can be both a victim of violence and a contributor to the conditions that led to more violence. What I want, if I'm being honest, is a version of justice that acknowledges the full complexity of what happened, that holds people accountable without destroying them, that centers the children who've lost so much and asks what they need to heal and grow. But the legal system we have isn't designed for that kind of justice. It's designed for verdicts, for sentences, for clear resolutions that feel deeply unsatisfying when the situation is this messy. The trial, when it happens, will probably take months, maybe longer. There will be jury selection, opening statements, witness testimony, cross-examination, evidence presentation, closing arguments, deliberation. Romeca's family will have to relive the worst day of their lives as prosecutors walk through what happened. Holly's family will have to watch her be described as a murderer. We'll have to sit with the knowledge that even an acquittal won't erase the suspicion, the judgment, the online mob that's already decided she's guilty. And at the end of it all, there will be a verdict. Guilty or not guilty. Either Holly will be sentenced to decades in prison, or she'll be released. Either Romeca's family will feel like justice was served, or they'll feel like the system failed them. Either Holly's family will celebrate, or they'll prepare for years of appeals and legal battles. But Romeca will still be dead. Carlos Jr. will still be growing up without his mother. The baby Holly and Carlos share will still be navigating a family fractured by tragedy. The child Holly is carrying will still be born into circumstances no one would choose. That's what I keep coming back to. No matter what the legal outcome is, the human cost is already paid. The damage is done. The question is what we do with it, how we move forward, how we prevent the next tragedy. I don't have easy answers. I don't think anyone does. But I do think there are lessons here, things we can learn from watching this case unfold. We can learn that social media amplifies conflict, that every post and comment and shared video ads fuel the fires that are already burning. We can learn that relationships are complicated, that domestic violence isn't always clear-cut, that toxicity can be mutual and still be harmful to everyone involved. We can learn that children are always the collateral damage, that adult conflicts create wounds that kids will carry for the rest of their lives. We can learn that the legal system, for all its flaws, is still better than vigilante justice, that courthouse brawls don't bring anyone closer to accountability or healing. We can learn that grief makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do, that the line between righteous anger and destructive rage is thinner than we'd like to believe. And maybe, if we're willing to sit with the discomfort of it, we can learn that there are no clear villains in most tragedies, just people making decisions in impossible situations, people carrying trauma, people reacting out of fear or pain or desperation. That doesn't excuse what happened. It doesn't make Romeca's death any less tragic. But it does make it harder to point fingers. Harder to say this person is entirely at fault and that person is entirely innocent. Harder to demand simple solutions to complex problems. The January 7th hearing is coming. Both families will probably be there, assuming the judge doesn't restrict access. There will probably be more security, more attention, more scrutiny from people online. Maybe there will be another confrontation. Maybe this time someone will get seriously hurt. Or maybe, hopefully, everyone will remember what's actually at stake here. Not their pride, not their online reputation, not their need to be right, but the children who are watching and learning and internalizing what conflict and loss and justice look like. Carlos Jr. is 7 years old. He's at an age where he understands that his mother is gone, where he's forming memories that will last the rest of his life, where he's learning lessons about relationships and conflict and how adults handle pain. What lessons is he learning right now? That violence is how you solve problems? That grief justifies any action? That some people's pain matters more than other people's dignity? Or is he learning that the adults in his life are doing their best in an impossible situation? That sometimes there are no good options? That justice is a process, not a destination? I hope it's the latter. I hope the people around him are protecting him from the worst of it, giving him space to be a kid, helping him process his grief in age-appropriate ways. But I worry that he's absorbing more than anyone realizes, that he's being shaped by this tragedy in ways that won't become clear until years from now. The same is true for the other children involved. The baby Carlos and Holly share. The child Holly is carrying. They're too young to understand what's happening, but that doesn't mean they're not affected by it. Infants and young children are incredibly attuned to stress, to tension, to the emotional climate of their environment. They don't need to understand the details to feel the weight of it. That's why the journalist's comment about the children struck me so deeply. The only people I feel any type of absolute pouring of my heart out for is the children, because they're the ones who had no choice, no agency, no ability to change the outcome. They're inheriting the consequences of adult decisions, and they'll be dealing with those consequences for decades. What do we owe them? What does Carlos owe them? What do Romeca's family and Holly's family owe them? What does the community, the legal system, the people watching online owe them? At minimum, we owe them the truth, not the sanitized version, not the version where everyone's a hero or everyone's a villain, but the complicated, messy human truth about what happened and why. When they're old enough, when they start asking questions, they deserve answers that don't simplify or excuse, but that help them understand. We owe them stability. Whatever the outcome of the trial, whatever happens to Holly and Carlos, those children need adults in their lives who are committed to their well-being, who aren't so consumed by grief or anger that they can't provide the kind of consistent, loving care kids need to thrive. We owe them a better story, not about the past. We can't change what happened, but about the future. We owe them a future where they're not defined by this tragedy, where they can grow up and make their own choices, and become their own people without constantly being reminded of the worst day of their families' lives. That's a lot to ask. Maybe too much. But if we're not striving for that, if we're not making that the goal, then what's the point of any of this? The next few months will determine a lot about how this case resolves. The trial will happen, assuming Holly doesn't take a plea deal. Evidence will be presented. Witnesses will testify. The jury will deliberate and reach a verdict. And then there will be sentencing or release or appeals or all the above. But the human story, the story that matters more than a legal outcome, will continue long after the courthouse doors close. Carlos Jr. will keep growing up. The babies will become toddlers and children, then teenagers who Google their family's name and find this story waiting for them. Holly will either be in prison or trying to rebuild her life. Romeca's family will either have found some measure of peace or they'll still be consumed by rage and grief. This isn't a story with a clean ending. It's not a story where justice gets served and everyone learns a lesson and life goes back to normal. It's a story about how one moment of violence ripples out to touch dozens of lives, how trauma gets passed down through generations, how systems meant to provide accountability often just add more pain to already unbearable situations. But it's also a story about resilience, about the community members who showed up to give Carlos Jr. a Christmas, about the people trying to make sense of something senseless, about the families on both sides who love their children fiercely enough to fight for them even when that fight looks ugly from the outside. I started this video by saying this is a case where the story isn't over, where we're still in the middle of something unfolding in real time. And that's true, but I want to end by acknowledging that for some people, the story is over. For Romeca, it ended on September 8th. She doesn't get a next chapter. She doesn't get to watch her son grow up, to see him graduate, to become whoever he's going to become. That's the permanent loss, the irreversible damage at the heart of this case. Everything else, the trial, the courthouse fights, the social media drama, even the question of Holly's guilt or innocence, is secondary to that loss. Romeca is gone. A mother, a daughter, a sister is gone. And no verdict will change that. So what's your theory? Not about who's guilty or innocent. The jury will decide that. But about what this case reveals about us, about how we handle conflict, about what we prioritize when grief and justice collide. What lessons should we be learning? What changes should we be making? What do we owe the children growing up in the aftermath of this tragedy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not to argue, not to pick sides, but to think together about what comes next, about how we prevent the next Romeca, the next Holly, the next Carlos Jr. This case stays with me. The human cost, the children caught in the middle, the way everyone involved is both victim and participant in different ways. It's the kind of story that doesn't let go. If it moved you too, if you think stories like this deserve to be told with care and complexity, like this video and subscribe. We're here to cover the cases that don't fit into easy narratives, the cases that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about violence, justice, and the systems we trust to protect us. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.